Feeling better than she had in days, Net walked by her sister's side instead of behind her and Rife. She was surprised that she wasn't angry at them anymore. As a matter of fact, she wasn't mad at anyone anymore. Well, except Danny, that is. She still wanted to kick Danny's butt, and she reasoned that before all this was over, she probably would. But she was not angry at her sister and Rife, at Jell and Chaz, or even at Matt. She felt it had to do with her sisters acknowledging that she needed her. She had felt abandoned and unloved and realized that she needed to be needed by her sister. She and her sister had been one since they were born, and they would always be. She decided that from now on, she was going to be a constant presence in her sister's life. She felt better when she was around her. She didn't care that they were going to be annoyed with her because she was always trying to be with them. It was all going to be for the best. Shoot. There was no way her sister was going to give up her virginity before she got married. They had made a pact a long time ago that they would remain virgins until their wedding, and she was not going to stand by and let her break her word. Not only was she going to be a constant presence, but she was also going to be annoying. She was going to be with them at the movies, at study time, at lunchtime. Heck, it was almost going to seem like she and Vet were attached at the hip. Rife had better get used to it because from now on, he was going to be dating two girls instead of one. And as soon as her sister told her they needed some privacy and she was sure she was going to go, she was going to let her know that she knew what she was planning and remind her of their vow. Yep, things were going to change. And just thinking about the nature of the change made Net feel lighter than a cloud. She was still angry about Matt, but other things were beginning to look up. Vet noticed the sudden change in her sister and thought it was because she had apologized to her. She really meant what she had said. She really was sorry for excluding her sister out of her life these past few weeks. She was glad Net had accepted her apology and was more calm. Why, she looked almost giddy with pleasure. Shoot, if an apology was all it took for Net to be happy, she would have apologized every day, thought Vet. She looked over and took Rife's hand and felt her heart skip a beat when he gently squeezed it while giving her a wink. Even though Matt was in trouble, Vet felt her heart soar. Her sister was no longer angry at her. Her boyfriend was in love with her, and they were going to be together real soon. She reached out and grabbed her sister's hand in her other hand and smiled in spite of herself. Minister Glover. The soft knock at the door of her study signaled to Pastor Linda Hollis that the new minister had arrived. Minister Paul Hayes had been corresponding with Pastor Hollis for 3 months and had finally decided to move to New York to join her congregation. He had visited on several occasions, but Pastor Hollis had decided not to mention his intentions until he was absolutely sure. She had been in 3 conferences with Minister Hayes and was very encouraged and impressed with his knowledge of the Bible, his love of God, and the report from his former pastor. When Paul first learned that he was being considered for the position as CEO for the new office in New York, he was mortified. Paul had visited the Big Apple on numerous occasions, and he absolutely hated the hustle and bustle of the big city. He couldn't stand the noise, the traffic jams, the impatient, rude, and reckless drivers, the unfriendly, unneighborly attitude of the people, and the high prices of just about everything. Of course, he was grateful for the promotion, and he had worked hard, and there was no one more qualified or deserving for the position but New York City? And then there was the matter of leaving his home church. Paul was literally sick to his stomach over having to leave St. Paul. He had belonged to the same church all of his adult life and actually had started his Christian walk with the Lord there and had never imagined that he would ever be anywhere else but there. Paul loved his church family, and they in turn loved him right back. Pastor James, the senior pastor of St. Paul, was an anointed and dedicated man of God, and Paul looked on him not only as a leader and a mentor, but also as a friend. When he told him he was moving to New York, Pastor James put him in touch with Pastor Hollis, and Paul was convinced he was going to enjoy worshiping at Holy Temple Church of God almost as much as he did at his former church. He had attended a few services and enjoyed the friendly, loving, anointed atmosphere that he felt each time he entered the sanctuary and looked forward to joining this congregation. He spoke to Pastor Hollis about his work schedule, his vision, and desire to live holy and upright before God, and his availability and ability to serve under her leadership. The one topic that had not come up and that he was sure was going to be covered in this next meeting was his marital status. He was not involved in a relationship, which was fine because he had not planned to be married just yet. Paul was a planner. He had planned his entire life out when he was a junior high student, and so far, everything was going according to that plan. He believed that if you planned, you were bound for success. While everyone was partying, cutting class, and making babies, Paul was studying, learning, and advancing. In other words, sticking to his plan. There were no words to describe his satisfaction with the list of accolades attached to his name. He had bought his first car at 24, been promoted to head of operations at his job a whole year earlier than he had originally planned. The only thing in his life he had not planned on was his walk with God. He was not a church goer when he was younger and just happened to attend a revival meeting with a co-worker 9 years ago. It was a night he would never forget. The Holy Ghost had convicted him that night, and he instantly incorporated God into his life and his heart. Now that he was a minister, he was excited to see what God had in store for him and eagerly looked forward to every day, knowing it was another day he would be able to live the life God had chosen for him to excel in so many different ways. The next area of his life that he was ready to step into was one that included a woman. Not just any woman, though, but a woman that he was sure God had been preparing for him while he himself was being prepared. He wanted a woman that loved the Lord and was content and confident in herself. He wanted a woman that was beautiful inside as well as outside, who was not necessarily a size 10, but took pride in her appearance, was respected and who would be able to pray beside him as well as play beside him. In his old church, Paul was sought after by all of the eligible females at St. Paul and even some of the ineligible ones, but he was not ready to pursue a relationship, so he chose to keep his distance while being polite and friendly. Suffice it to say, he left quite a few broken hearts when he left North Carolina, but it could not be helped. His daily prayer to God was for him to guide his every step and decision, and he did not feel led to pursue a relationship until now. When he walked into a holy temple, everything that had been happening to him, the move, the promotion, the non interest in the sisters at his old church, all made sense to him instantly. It was as if a light from heaven shone on the woman he heard the other members of the church lovingly refer to as Sister Jones, and he was sure this was the woman God had been preparing for him. So, as he knocked on the door to Pastor Hollis's door, he hoped he wouldn't appear too anxious when she brought up the subject of relationships, because he fully intended to bring up the subject of Sister Jones. Minister Hayes left the pastor's office feeling like he was on top of the world. He was sure his ministry would flourish under this anointed woman of God and was confident that she felt that his being there would be equally as beneficial for the church. He wasn't looking for anyone to take him right away, and since he wasn't planning on going anywhere, he was sure that in time they all would love him just like he was sure he would love them. A glance at his watch made him quicken his pace as he remembered the appointment with the cable guy. He'd been waiting 8 days to get his cable connected, and the last thing he wanted was to be late. The representative had told him that a missed appointment would put him at the bottom of the list, and he would have to wait another 8 days. Getting into his brand new white Cadillac Escalade, he pulled away from the curb and headed towards his home with his spirits soaring. He began singing a praise song as his mind began to go over the events of the last couple of months. Since the day his boss had come into his office and told him about the promotion up until today, felt like a dream to him. He felt like he didn't deserve the blessings that the Lord was heaping on him. He had a wonderful new job, had joined a beautiful church whose pastor was a true woman of God, had moved into a lovely home in a nice neighborhood, and last but certainly not least, was about to start on a new journey in his life that he was sure the Lord had been preparing him for all his life. The very thought of Denise Jones brought a smile to his lips, and he began singing louder. The rich sound of his baritone tenor voice filled the car, and he reached over to turn off the radio that was broadcasting the latest weather report. He sang song after song in an effort to concentrate more on God and get the thought of Denise out of his mind, because there was something about the woman that was intoxicating. Sure, he was celibate and in very good control of his emotions and his thoughts, thanks to lots of prayer and the help of God. But for some reason, this woman had an effect on him that no other woman did. That is why he was so sure that she was the woman God had been preparing for him and him for her. He had not wanted to be with a woman for years, much to the disappointment of his many co-workers and the women in his old church. And he was not a bit worried because that is just what he had wanted. But now that it was clear that he had met the woman he was sure God had selected for him, he was ready to begin courting her and starting the new phase of his life. He briefly wondered if she was a planner and just as quickly dismissed the thought from his head. It would be silly of him to think she was a planner. He knew he was a bit obsessive when it came to planning and didn't expect anyone to be like him. He couldn't remember when he had started planning, but for as long as he could remember, he had planned his life out, and he was quite pleased with the results. Everything was right on track, and he was practically giddy with anticipation and excitement just thinking about the next phase of his life. His love for God was paramount, and his confidence in God was unshakable. So he was absolutely sure that it was God that had ordered his steps, and he had guided him to this city, to this church, to this woman. His mind went to a conversation he'd had with his mother on his 22nd birthday, and a slight frown creased his handsome brow. She had felt he was too serious about everything and often told him he should relax and slow down. She had invited him over for dinner, complaining that he never took time out to visit with her anymore. He had arrived for dinner right on time and had brought her a dozen long-stemmed red roses and a box of her favorite candy. She had prepared his favorite meal, pork chops steamed in onions and green peppers, mashed potatoes with gravy and okra. As they ate and reminisced over his youth, Paul felt like a kid again. He couldn't remember when he and his mother had had such a great time together. They were having such a wonderful time that dinner was over before they both knew it. He pushed his chair back from the table and rubbed his swollen belly, commenting that the food was delicious and that he couldn't eat another bite.